Greetings, fellow Hyperboreans, and welcome back. Dave here, the developer of the Hyperborea system for Foundry VTT, and I've got another video for you demonstrating the latest features that we'll be releasing with version 1.5.1. So I have a number of items that I've been tracking in GitHub doing the development, and so I track them as GitHub has things called issues. They're basically my to-do list, and so I've got them numbered. So let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 issues being closed out or marked complete with this new release. So we're going to start with issue number 92 was a request by a user to actually include an item icon in the chat when it's sending information to the chat. So let's just demonstrate that really quick here, and I can do that very simply. Let's just we'll open up Argyros here. And remember, in the context of Foundry, an item includes things like class abilities. It includes your weapons and armor and ammunition, and it includes spells, as well as just plain old pure items. All of those things within the context of Foundry are an item. So when we send things from these different types of items to the chat, they're going to include the icon now. So that icon might be the generic ones, like for generic items, it's just this bag. But if I apply a custom icon like this Amulet of Undead Turning, let's just do this. I'm just going to send the description to the chat with this eyeball, and you can see now it's included there, and it's got the name of the item, all nice and bold. So one of the other things I did with this feature was I reformatted the output to make it try and look a little prettier. I'm not an artist by any stretch, but hopefully this is a little easier on the eyes than maybe some of the previous text. So now I'm including the item image there, as you can see. Same thing with Gauntlets of Ogre Power. Again, you get the item there. If it's a generic thing, like, well, here I've got the Flamebrand sword, so we can bring that over. And this was just a homebrew version. This isn't the Flame Tongue sword in the actual referee's manual, but just a homebrew version that I did. But you can see, but if it's a generic weapon, it's still just going to bring across the generic icon, like the weapon icon. It's a sword and shield icon for weapons. Armor has this shield icon like that. So it brings it across whatever that happens to be. Okay. Same for, abilities. You're going to get this kind of shield icon for abilities. So that was issue number 92. Like I said, I also made this bold, the name bold, and I sort of wrapped it in with these little horizontal rules to just kind of set it off a little bit, make it hopefully a little easier to read. That was issue number 92, just a little sort of kind of a quality of life visual improvement. The next item that we're closing out here is issue number 93, which was to add the weapon annotations to weapons. Now this might be interesting for a lot of folks. So if you know the rules, well, hopefully you know the rules, but let's just actually pop this up here and we'll just go into the combat very briefly, or the equipment rather. We go to weapons. So the annotations that I'm talking about are these things right here, melee weapons table annotations. And there's a bunch for melee and there's a handful for missile weapons as well. So what I have done is on the weapon item type, on the item sheet for weapons, which if I go to combat, I can edit any one of these. You'll see if I hit the edit button on there, what you've got now is under attributes, which I realize, generally we don't spend a lot of time on this attributes tab unless you're actually creating the item in the first place, which means mostly it's going to be GMs in here. You might be checking the roll formula to make sure that's correct. But the annotations down here, this is what's interesting. So this is new right here. You see it says annotations. Normally with a new weapon, or in fact a lot of weapons will just have nothing on there. So if I go into addle, I think I've got nothing in there. Yep. Now this was a custom weapon. This is not in the rules as far as I can recall. I just added it because I was playing around. But once you click on annotations, and I'll go back to the sword for this one, so we'll close this out. Click on our little book icon there. You get this pop out. And you can see these are all the annotations for both melee and missile weapons. I didn't really differentiate them. Just realize that the melee weapons are the first ones. The last two are missile weapons. Strength damage adjustment applies. Strength damage adjustment applies only if drawways is adjusted. And then there's one up here. If you look at the annotations in the rule book, There's one that gets used for both melee and missile, so I included it in melee, and I didn't put it a second time down under missile. That seemed kind of silly. So it's only in here once. Okay, so enough said about that. But let's talk about this. So here's how you add an annotation to your weapon. You just click it. You see I click it, it turns red, and over on the item sheet, it pops in there. It's got a little sword icon next to it. It's basically a bullet point. Double damage again. See, I just added that. No, and then I tap it again to toggle it back off. And toggle it back off. And that's how that works. Super simple. Currently, it's only informational. That is to say, there is nothing in the system that requires these to be set up, nor do having these set up bring any additional features to the system, or any enforcement of different rules or anything like that. Now in the future, that may change. I have ideas on that. But for now, this is purely informational. Again, a lot of people probably won't even care about this, and that's cool. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to. But if you want to track it in your weapons, this is an easy way to do it. So that's weapon annotations. It's only on the weapon sheet. If you look at other item types, like items, and just edit one of these, if you go to the attributes tab, there's no annotations there, obviously. So, okay. So that was issue number 93. Let's see now. Issue 97 then, we jumped a few numbers ahead. Adding two-handed damage option for melee weapons. So that was another player user request, and basically the request looks like this. Can we have a two-handed damage field next to the standard one-handed damage field? I actually did not call this one-handed damage for a reason. We'll talk about that in a second. But could we have a two-handed damage field and have the system handle both of those instead of, up until now, my previous videos even talked about this, when you set up a weapon that can be used either one-handed or two-handed, you would want to set it up twice on your character sheet, once for one-handed use and once for two-handed use. Well, the request to add two-handed damage came in, and I thought about it, and I liked the idea. I had already thought about the idea myself in the past, so I thought, okay, you know what, I'm going to see if I can do this. And I did. So it's there, it's easy. Now, you don't have to use it. Totally optional, so if you've already got weapons set up with a one-hand version and a two-handed version, you don't have to change anything. You can just keep using them the way they work like this, and it'll work just fine. And consider this damage field to be your primary damage field. And when I say that, what I'm saying is for a true two-handed weapon, like a two-handed sword, two-handed scimitar, any other two-handed weapon, you're actually going to put the damage in the damage field. You're not going to put it in two-handed damage field, okay? If you left damage empty and put it in two-handed damage, it actually doesn't work. You're not going to be able to roll damage for that weapon, okay? It's just going to break the weapon. So for a weapon that only has one damage die, even though it's two-handed, just use the damage field as your primary damage field. Two-handed damage is strictly for weapons that can alternate between one and two-handed use. Okay, that's what that's for. And we'll demonstrate this and how this works, and I'll talk more about it when we get to that point. But I did implement this. And then what I did was, again, we'll demonstrate this, but if you make an attack with weapons now, up until now, the system, if it detects you made a hit, it will roll damage for you right away automatically. Well, that's changing, and now you're going to get a roll damage button. And for a weapon that has both damage and two-handed damage populated, you're going to get two damage buttons, one for the standard damage and one for two-handed damage. Okay, so the next item is issue 98, and that was adding bow and crossbow point-blank attack bonuses. Now that's only for characters that have weapon mastery in the bow or the crossbow. But what that does is, let's see, I've got the longbow here, and this is a fighter type, so he has a weapon mastery. And I think I already set up mastery. This is the second, the cross swords is grand mastery, and this is just weapon mastery here. So he is set up for weapon mastery. And what that does is it includes, if you're in point blank range, it gives you an extra +1 on your attack roll. And I will demonstrate that in combat in a little bit, so I won't say anything more about that at the moment. So then we get to the next one, which is issue 100, which is a bug fix. And this was reported fairly recently, just in the last week. And this was an issue where if I have an item in a container, so for example, I've got arrows in my quiver and I want to copy them or transfer them to another character. So if I bring up Artemisia and I look at her items here, the issue is that if I drag these arrows over to her character sheet, it seemed to fail. They would not appear on the sheet, but her encumbrance would go up, indicating that the item really is there and it's adding weight to her total carried weight, but it's not visible on the sheet. And the problem was when the item was copied over, it was carrying over the container ID, which is unique to Argyros. So it would get over to Artemisia, the container ID doesn't exist, and it would fail to display the item. So I fixed that. It actually wipes out the location and the container ID when it copies over. So it'll come over as an uncontained item, and it'll appear down in the bottom section here where items are not in containers. And then, you know, the player could drag it up into her arrow quiver if she wanted. So remember, arrow quiver, these are unique items. The system doesn't look at the name. It actually looks like at an underlying ID. So it's not going to say arrows go into the quiver. It's going to throw them uncontained, and then the player can move them into a container if they want. Okay, so that was the bug fix. That was issue 100. Then we move on to issue 101, 101. These were some combat enhancements. This was an idea I've had for a while. Finally got around to implementing it. And essentially, these are from tables 139 and 140 on page 264 of the player's handbook. And it's the combat chapter. And in there's a number of attacker situational modifiers and defender armor class modifiers. So the attacker would be attack roll modifiers, and then the defender is AC modifiers that are situational as well. And so I figured out, I basically looked at the ones that would be easy to implement. So I didn't do all of them, but I did do most of them. And so what I covered was, if the attacker is blind, it applies a -4 on your attack roll. If the attacker is invisible, it applies a +4 on your attack roll. If the attacker has high ground, it'll apply +1 on the attack roll. If the defender is prone, what I do is I apply it to the attacker's attack roll. So, and I'll show you again what that looks like. So instead of actually adjusting the defender's armor class, I apply it as a modifier to the attacker's attack roll. Same for if the defender is stunned, again, a modifier to the attacker's attack roll. Defender has high ground, again, it affects the attacker's attack roll. Defender is hindered, and so for all of these, almost all of these are token statuses, okay? And so we're going to see, like, our Ardovera here I have set up as blind, okay? So that is a status, and so when she attacks somebody, she will have a -4 on her attack rolls, all right? So things like that. So most of these are status-based or effect-based. The exception is high ground is determined based on the elevation field in the upper left corner. So you know how you can right-click a token to get this stuff here, and right here is elevation. By default, that's 0. But in this case, this skeleton happens to have climbed up on top of a sarcophagus, so he's 4 feet higher. So anyone attacking him, he's got high ground on anyone standing on the floor. So it'll apply, according to the rules, it gives him a +1 bonus to his AC. So what I do is I apply a -1 penalty to the attacker's attack roll, okay? And these two guys that are blue tinted, they're invisible. So they have the invisibility status or effect set on them. That's this one down here. You can hardly even tell that it's selected, but it is. So they're both invisible. So they're going to have +4 on their attack rolls, or anyone attacking the Orc Necromancer would have -4 on their attack roll. And then Artemisia will have +4 when she makes an attack. And then, of course, her invisibility would go away. Anyone who's hindered, normally they would get a -2 penalty on their armor class. So for hindered, what I'm using is the restrained effect in Foundry, because there is no hindered. But restrained, it's got this kind of net, so it's like as if they're hindered or restrained. So if you apply that one, it's going to treat them as hindered, and they're going to have, anyone attacking them will have a +2 bonus, equivalent to a -2 penalty to his armor class, okay? So that's how all of these work. Again, we'll demonstrate this in a little bit. Let's see. And then there's rules about if the defender is encumbered or heavily encumbered. That's actually a repeat. It's in the tables 139 and 140. It's in table 140 specifically. It's actually a repeat of some other text on encumbrance, where it says that someone who's encumbered takes a -1 penalty on their AC and a -10 10 feet to their move. So if their move is normally 40, they would be reduced to 30. And if they're heavily encumbered, it's -2 on the AC and -20 feet on their move. Okay, so that's the rule. But the rules as written say that's what you should apply, but then they also say effectively, the GM has to determine who's encumbered and who's not, and it's basically common sense. So there's no hard and fast calculation to say, if you're carrying X number of pounds, you're encumbered, and if you're carrying X plus Y number of pounds, you're heavily encumbered. There's no calculation. So what I've done for that particular piece, I implemented these as beta features, by the way. I forgot to mention that. So for this 101, the combat enhancements, and 102 is actually the GM defined encumbrance. So those are two separate issues in GitHub, not that it matters, but those are both beta features. They are turned off by default. So you'd have to go into your settings and turn them on. So if you remember how to do settings, you're going to hit the gears, you're going to go to configuration settings, you're going to go to Hyperborea, and you're going to see down here, beta, enable combat situation mod detection. And it tells exactly what it's going to try and do. And then beta, enable custom encumbrance formula. And again, those are disabled by default, so you have to check the box to enable it. And then these two fields here, they're only applied if this checkbox is checked. And this is where the GM decides, what do I consider reasonable for encumbrance? And what it is a multiplier by strength. So this is disabled by default. If you want to run strictly rules as written, just leave it disabled. But if you want to enable this, set yourself a strength modifier. Like in my case, I do 10 and 15. Those are the defaults because that's what I thought was reasonable. But essentially, strength times 10. So if you've got a strength of 12, you can carry up to 120 pounds and not be encumbered. Once you've crossed 120, you're encumbered. And then strength times 15. So again, if your strength was 12, you've now got 180 pounds, and then you'll be heavily encumbered. And that's how those would be applied. And we'll demonstrate that in a little bit here as well. So enable those to get those features. Again, those are beta features, but it is, again, it allows the GMs to determine what they feel is reasonable based on a strength multiplier. So it adheres to the spirit of the rule where the GM can determine what's encumbrance and what's not. And you can even have it, leave it disabled by default if you want. So let's see. So that was issues 101 and 102, and that actually finishes out all the items that are closed out. So now we're going to do a little demonstration of these features, and you can kind of see how they work. So let's actually look at encumbrance first, because that's a simple one to demonstrate. So let's say Andronakos, who has a low strength, he's easy to push over the edge. So he's already got 36.5 pounds, and of course his strength was 7. So when he gets to 70.1 pounds, he's going to be encumbered. And I happen to have a bag of rocks that's 40 pounds right here. So I'm going to drag that to the character sheet. And you can see now his weight was updated to 76.5, and it says encumbered in bright red. And if we go to combat, it says encumbered here, and his armor class and move have been reduced. So his armor class was 2 and his move was 40, but these have been affected by that encumbrance. In fact, I'm going to drag another bag of rocks over, and we're not going to worry about looking at it on the items tab. We'll just leave it here, and you're going to see him switch to heavily encumbered, and you're going to see the armor class and the move change again. So we'll drag the bag of rocks over, we'll let it go. Now it's heavily encumbered, and you see it became bold. He's getting fat, right? Not really fat, but you can see it got heavy, bold. Now it's really heavily encumbered, and his armor class went from 3 to 4. His move went from 30 to 20. Now if I go back to the items, he's got 2 bags of rocks. And they're 40 pounds each. I'm going to delete both of these. Now he's no longer encumbered, and his AC is back to 2 and 40 as it should be. I should also point out, up until now, move has been a manually maintained field. It was not automatically calculated. I've changed that with this feature. Now, if it's disabled, you're fine. These are all manually managed. But if you enable the encumbrance feature, you also really need to enable the, let me go back into here again. I should have mentioned this. The auto-calculate armor class, if this is disabled, the encumbrance will still give you the flag, but it's not going to change your armor class and movement for you. It's just going to give you the red and the bold red text. So you could actually run your game with the encumbrance warnings, but not having it actually affecting your armor class and movement speeds. But if you have this enabled, which is enabled by default, by the way, in 99% of cases it works perfectly. There's a few edge cases with magic items that do some weird things that don't calculate, which is noted in the description here. But anyways, so I just wanted to mention that you need to have that enabled if you really want this thing to be affecting your AC and your move, which I think most people do want that automation built in. So we have him like that, and we're good. And that, again, that applies, that makes those penalties on the AC and the move. So I'm not going to worry about that for the combat, but you did see it in effect going on there, so that's how that works. So now if we go into a combat here, and I actually had these set up as combatants already, so we're set here. Actually, you know what? I'm not going to worry about this. I've talked about the group-based initiative before, so we know how that works. By the way, you can see the effects that have been applied to these guys. So he's prone, he's hindered, he's invisible. Again, it doesn't show very well, but that's invisible. She's blind up here. So, you know, those effects are all on there. You can see that's what's been applied to the tokens. So that's that. But if we back out of here then, so now if I want to say, again, he's invisible, right? I'm going to say Argyros knows he's here. Remember the rules, if you know the rules for invisibility, not only do you take a -4 penalty, but you kind of have to have an idea of where they are, and that's kind of a GM ruling. So he's invisible. So as a player, the player would not actually see this token on the map. I'm in as GM, so of course I can see everything. But a player would not actually see this. But if I gave the player some hint that there's an invisible thing over here, maybe he hears a voice talking, Argyros could run up here. If he targets that, or if I target it on his behalf and I make the attack, what I want to point out is you see this defender is invisible. This is what's important right here. You can see the effect being applied. You can see it's applying a situational modifier. And you can have multiple situational modifiers, and the system will do the math. So if I actually take this out, let's actually have her doing the attack. She's invisible. She's getting a +4 on the attack. In fact, she uses a short bow, so she can be back here. She gets +4 as invisible. He gets -4 because he's invisible. We use her short bow, and you can see she's invisible, +4. Defender's invisible, -4, and the situational modifier works out to 0. So that's how that's working, okay? So you got the invisible there. She could be making that attack. And of course, you know, the math works through. We're going to do a roll here. Whether I hit or not, there was no situational modifier because it was 0, so it doesn't show here. If there had been a situational modifier on non-0 sit mod, it would be listed here, but because it was 0, it doesn't show up here. Let me find one that's actually... So Adovra is blind, so she's taking a penalty to her attacks. I'm going to actually have her go to this guy. He is standing up in the sarcophagus, but he's not standing on top of it, so he doesn't have a height advantage, right? So Adovra is going to target him, and she's going to attack with her two-handed warhammer. And again, one-handed versus two-handed. In the new system, or this new release, I don't have to have it this way, but I haven't modified these yet to put the two-handed dice rolls in there yet. So a two-handed version is just set up right there like that. And you can leave your items like that. So this way, I'm not going to break anybody's existing setups. Just leave it as is if you don't feel like editing all your items. But she'll make a two-handed attack. You can see situational modifier, she's blind, so she gets a -4 on her attack roll to target that guy. And here, well, actually, oopsie. You can see now the situational modifier of -4 is being applied. And then I mentioned that it no longer rolls damage for you, so now you get this damage D10. It shows you the damage formula, and you tap that to roll damage, and you can see it's base roll plus her strength damage modifier, which is 0 because she doesn't have one. But now the GM can then take and apply that to the skeleton, and he's toast. Okay, so that works, you know, like that. Now, Argyros, he's going to run up to this guy who has that 4-foot height advantage. Target him, there we go, flame sword. So even if I back up Argyros to here and I make a melee attack roll, I get target is beyond melee range. So, but it still pops up the dialogue. So it's one of those things where it'll let you do it, but it does give you that warning. So anyways, we've got defender on higher ground. I get a -1 penalty on my attack roll. Make the attack roll. Hopefully I hit, and I did. And you can see now here I did have his weapons set up. So we'll go to his flame brand here, and I did do the new setup: D8 one-handed, D10 two-handed for a broadsword, one or two-handed use. And of course I have the annotation set, but it doesn't matter. This is just informational. But those are set, so when I make the roll, I hit. It did not roll damage for me automatically. I can choose one or two-handed. I'm going to choose two-handed. It's going to roll my d10. And of course, it applies my item, because it's a magic sword, my strength, and my weapon mastery modifier. So it applies all that. I did a total of 6 points of damage because I rolled a 6. I did a total of 12 points of damage. And of course, the skeleton takes half damage from blade weapons. So I would have to, I could just apply the half damage here. And I accidentally applied it to myself. So let's add that back. Do that. We're going to apply the half damage. And it killed the skeleton anyway. But the other thing is I have this set up. Again, this was a homebrew sword where I said, okay, anyone struck, if they're still alive, they may have to make a saving throw versus device. So the skeleton can make a save versus device. And he failed, and then since he did fail, I can apply the burning effect to him. So you can see plus burning, and if I open him up under effects, it added the burning condition. He's also got the dead effect on him as well. But you can see that was applied by the flame brand. So I talked about this in my last video, but again, that's, you know, that's an example of, hey, I've got a flaming sword. I can apply flaming to things. It's not going to do damage to them on a per round basis. My description here does say it will do an additional d4 damage per round, but that's up to the GM and the player to remember. The system is not going to do that for you automatically. It just applies the flaming or the burning effect, which hopefully that little red icon in the upper left corner will be sufficient to give you that kind of subtle visual cue that, hey, there's something going on that I might need to do. So, but he did get the -1 attack penalty because of that. This guy's prone, so if I were to say, oh, let's have Andronakos step in and he's going to attack with a sword, with a spell rather, sorry. I think I might have Acid Arrow there. So let's target him, bring up Acid Arrow. You can see it's got the range. Spell range is 30 feet, so we're okay. Defender's prone, so he's getting a +4 bonus on his attack roll. Formula for the spell. Nat 1, so I really failed that attack roll. But it was Acid Arrow, so you know that's what happens. You have to do an attack roll to hit. But you can see those things being applied. And if we go all the way over here, finally Argyros is going to try and attack this invisible guy. I think I showed that already, but yeah, you can see Defender's invisible. So again, those all are working just like that. Let's see. So was there anything else I wanted to demonstrate here? Trying to remember. We talked about, again, the weapon chats include the weapon icon, whether if it's the generic one or the nice, if you added a custom icon for your weapon, you've got those there. Annotations, two-handed damage, which you've now seen. Of course, we talked about saving and applying effects before, but again, that was, you know, showing that again. I think that covers everything I wanted to cover today. So there you go. Those are the new features in this new release 1.5.1 that will be coming out. Well, it's probably out as of the release of this video. So be sure to keep your systems up to date. And you know, if you do run into any bugs, please report them in the Northwind Adventures Discord server. I'm on there. I do keep an eye on it throughout the day. So when people report bugs, I try to respond very quickly. I've tried to test this as extensively as I could to make sure it's a good, solid release. And, well, as always, happy gaming, Hyperboreans. This is Dave signing off.